The cold air hummed with the low whine of energy fields, pulsating like invisible walls around the towering metal structure. The prison, a fortress on a desolate planet, was surrounded by hostile terrain. Jagged cliffs stretched out in every direction, ensuring no escape was possible, not by foot, not by air. Monoliths of smooth, gray metal jutted out of the ground, blending into the bleak atmosphere of this alien world. Inside, the hallways were just as lifeless, sterile. Everything was controlled by advanced technology, energy grids, surveillance drones, and artificial intelligence that never tired, never missed a beat. Alex sat alone in his cell. Cold steel bars flickered with an electric hum, giving off a faint, unwelcoming glow. His clothes, torn and dirty, clung to his body, still damp from sweat and whatever moisture this strange planet offered. He'd lost track of how many days he'd been there. His mind, once sharp, was foggy, confused. It was the same thing every day: cold meals, harsh flights, silence except for the occasional whisper of a drone flying by. No contact, no questions, just confinement. He hadn't been anyone special back on Earth. A regular guy, caught in something he didn't understand. His abduction had been sudden, brutal, flashes of light and strong hands pulling him from his life. His memories of that night still flickered in his head like a bad dream, but the aliens who held him had never spoken to him. They treated him like something unworthy of notice, just another body in their prison. But his mind was still working, still planning, still fighting the fog. Other prisoners wandered the corridors under the watchful eyes of the AI drones. Some shuffled along, shoulders slumped in defeat, while others sat in quiet contemplation. Alien species, each stranger than the last, all locked in the same miserable existence. Some had resigned themselves to their fate, believing escape was nothing more than a cruel fantasy. They spoke in low voices, whispering in languages Alex couldn't understand. One prisoner, though, wasn't like the others. His name was Zorak, a tall, gray-skinned alien with piercing black eyes and a quiet, analytical demeanor. Zorak had spent years studying the prison's systems, mapping out the structure in his mind. Over time, he and Alex had struck up a cautious friendship, sharing scraps of knowledge, learning what they could about the alien technology around them. Zorak had managed to collect vital information on how the prison operated, the weak points in the security grids, the shift changes of the AI drones. It wasn't much, but it was something. But there was also Kyare, a serpentine creature with scales that shimmered in the dim light. Kyare was different. She was sharp, too sharp. She watched Alex, always a step behind him. Her eyes followed him with a predatory gaze, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that she was waiting for something, waiting to turn on him the moment it suited her. The aliens who ran the prison, a race known as the Darien, were cold and calculating. They spoke in their clipped language, never addressing the prisoners directly, only issuing commands through their AI systems. They were an advanced race, technologically superior to any other species Alex had seen. Their ships, their prisons, their weapons, all of it seemed like magic compared to what humans had back on Earth. And they saw humans as nothing more than an inferior species, one to be controlled, caged, or discarded. Alex had overheard fragments of conversations between the guards. The Darien were part of a larger galactic hierarchy, one that viewed humans as barely sentient, nothing more than a lower life form. They didn't care about what Alex was or what he had been. They cared only about the fact that he was here, that he was in their way. But there was something else. Alex had noticed how certain Darien guards lingered longer near his cell. The AI that monitored his every move seemed to glitch, if only for a second, when it scanned him. The other prisoners didn't seem to notice, or maybe they just didn't care. But Alex felt it. He could see the brief flickers in the holographic fields, hear the low buzz in the walls when he passed by. It was subtle, but it was there. Something about him was different. And the Darien knew it. Alex had been biding his time, watching, waiting. He couldn't do this alone, and he knew it. Every interaction in the prison was measured, cautious. He started reaching out to the few prisoners who hadn't completely given up. Small conversations in hushed tones, exchanged glances in passing. He found a few who were willing to listen, to believe that escape wasn't just a dream. Zorak, in particular, became a key ally. Zorak knew the prison better than anyone, having studied the systems with a calm, clinical precision that Alex admired. Their exchanges were quick, deliberate, but filled with just enough hope to keep pushing forward. Zorak had noticed inconsistencies in the guards' rotations, slight gaps in the surveillance system that could be exploited. He spoke of weak points in the energy fields, areas where the pulse was slow enough to slip through if timed perfectly. It wasn't much, but it was something. As they whispered plans, a strange camaraderie began to form between them, built on a shared desperation. Other prisoners occasionally listened in, but most were too broken to act. There was one, however, who showed interest, Kairi. She had the look of someone who had her own agenda, but Alex couldn't afford to turn away potential help, not now. But Kairi was more dangerous than he anticipated. She began staying close, too close. At first, Alex thought it was suspicion, but then it became clear, she wasn't just watching him. She was watching for a reason. Every time they made progress, Kairi was there, offering a suggestion, a nod of agreement, but her eyes never matched her words. Alex's gut told him something was off, but Zorak insisted they needed her knowledge of certain sectors of the prison. They couldn't do this without her, or so it seemed. The confirmation came when Alex noticed small shifts in the guards' behavior after their conversations. Guards were suddenly showing up in places they hadn't before. Subtle, but noticeable. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Kairi was feeding information to their captors. Alex confronted her in the shadows of the prison, and though she denied it with her usual smooth talk, there was no mistaking the venom in her tone when she realized she'd been found out. She didn't need to say it. Her betrayal was written all over her face. Despite the setback, Alex pressed on. With Zorak's help, they managed to exploit tiny cracks in the system. One guard was distracted long enough for Alex to hack into a minor control panel, just for a moment, giving them insight into the prison's internal workings. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a win. They managed to short-circuit one of the surveillance drones, rerouting its signal for a brief period. Small victories, but each one gave Alex more confidence, more determination. The feeling of being trapped began to erode as he realized they were making progress, however small. But the danger was real, and it was growing. Each small win came with increased risk. The aliens weren't stupid. They would catch on soon, and Alex knew it. Every success made the prison's AI respond faster, adapt quicker. And with Kairi lurking, the threat of being turned over to the guards loomed like a shadow over every move they made. In the quiet moments, alone in his cell, Alex wrestled with himself. What if this didn't work? What if they were caught, or worse, what if they were simply outmatched? The Darien were so far ahead of humans, technologically, intellectually. Alex wasn't a genius, wasn't special. These were aliens who had conquered whole systems, who looked down on humans as insects. What chance did he really have against them? But every time doubt crept in, something pulled him back. His mind, though weary, refused to surrender. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. There was a deeper drive, something beyond the walls of the prison. He didn't know why, but he had to keep going. There was something wrong with this place, something wrong with how it reacted to him. The way the systems glitched when he got close, the way certain guards seemed uneasy in his presence. It was as if the prison itself was somehow reacting to him, like he didn't belong here, or maybe like he was meant for something else. Each time he hacked into the system, the feedback was almost tangible. The screens flickered in strange ways, the lights dimmed, but only around him. Even Zorak noticed it, though either of them spoke about it directly. The AI monitoring system stuttered, just for a second, every time Alex interfaced with it. It wasn't normal. And deep down, Alex knew it had to mean something. The plan was simple in theory, but execution was always the hardest part. Alex and his group of allies moved through the shadowy corridors with a quiet urgency, their steps light, breaths measured. The prison hummed around them, a constant reminder that at any moment, the alien AI could detect even the smallest misstep. Zorak led the way, his knowledge of the security systems guiding them through blind spots and around surveillance drones that hovered just above their heads. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as they reached the first checkpoint, a control panel embedded into the wall, just as Zorak had described. Alex worked quickly, fingers moving across the alien console. The symbols were foreign, but by now, he had learned enough from his previous attempts to know what to look for. He bypassed the initial layers of security, watching as the lights in the corridor flickered for a brief moment. They were in. The alarm systems blinked off, and the drone's patrol routes were temporarily disrupted. This was their window. As they advanced further, the tension in the group was palpable. Every corner they turned could mean discovery, every step closer to freedom was a gamble. They reached the final access point, a massive door leading to the docking bay. Alex glanced at Zorak, who nodded silently. Everything had to be perfect now. There would be no second chances. But then, Kyare made her move. Just as Alex input the final code, she stepped back, her expression cold and calculating. With a swift motion, she activated a hidden communicator, sending out a silent alert to the guards. Alex froze for a split second, heart dropping as the realization hit. Kyare had been playing them all along, and now they were out of time. The door to the docking bay began to slide open, but at the same moment, the blaring sound of an alarm cut through the air. The prison was onto them. Without thinking, Alex dove forward, tackling Kyare to the ground before she could do more damage. The group scattered, each prisoner running toward the ships docked in the bay, but the guards were closing in. "Go!" Zorak yelled, pulling Alex off Kyare as she hissed and writhed beneath him. He didn't have time to think, didn't have time to process the betrayal, only to act. He sprinted toward the nearest starship, the sleek design reflecting the cold, sterile light of the prison. He threw himself into the cockpit, hands shaking as he gripped the controls. Nothing happened. Panic surged through him, the feeling of the guards closing and pressing down on his chest. Why wasn't it working? He slammed his hands against the dashboard, desperation creeping into his movements. And then, something clicked. The ship's systems hummed to life beneath his touch, the console lighting up in response to his presence. Alex hesitated for a moment, then pushed forward on the controls. The ship obeyed, rising smoothly off the ground as if it had been waiting for him, responding to his every command with startling precision. Zorak and the others were scrambling to board the ship as Alex hovered above the docking bay, lasers from the guard units firing up at them, but the ship's shields held. It was as if it knew what to do, as if it had been programmed to follow him. The more Alex flew, the more intuitive it became. The controls responded to his thoughts almost as much as his touch, reacting to his instincts before he even realized what he was doing. He pulled the ship into a sharp turn, dodging blasts from the prison's defense turrets with ease. Zorak's voice crackled over the comm, his words barely audible over the rush of the escape. "How are you doing this?" Zorak asked, breathless. I don't know," Alex replied, his voice filled with equal parts wonder and fear. The ship felt alive beneath him, like it was somehow connected to him on a deeper level. It didn't make sense, but he couldn't deny what was happening. The ship was made for him, designed specifically for human control. He pushed the thought aside for now, focusing on getting them out. The alien prison loomed behind them, its massive structure now a distant silhouette as Alex accelerated, breaking through the planet's atmosphere with a sudden burst of speed. They were free, at least for the moment. But as the ship soared into the quiet expanse of space, Alex's mind raced. This wasn't normal. No human should have been able to control this ship so easily, not without training, not without knowing how. The ship had responded to him, and only him, as if it had been waiting for him all along. There was more to this escape than just breaking out of a prison. Alex felt it deep in his bones. This ship, this power, it wasn't an accident. Something bigger was at play here, something that involved him in ways he couldn't yet understand. As they drifted further from the alien world, the weight of that realization settled heavily in his chest. Whatever this was, it was far from over. As the ship drifted through the silence of space, Alex's mind was far from calm. The adrenaline of their escape had begun to fade, replaced by a gnawing feeling that something didn't add up. Zorak, seated at a nearby console, suddenly picked up a transmission. It was heavily encrypted, but the fragments they could hear were enough to stop Alex cold. The Darien commanders were discussing him, specifically him, words like containment and genetic anomaly floated through the static, followed by a phrase that sent a chill down his spine. The human must not reach the outer systems. If he unlocks the full potential, we are all doomed. Alex blinked, the weight of the word sinking in. Potential? Doomed? It didn't make sense. He wasn't special. He was just a guy who got abducted, thrown into a prison, and tried to survive. But the pieces were starting to fall into place. The way the prison systems had glitched when he was near, how the starship responded only to him. This wasn't coincidence. The Darians had put him in that prison for a reason. They hadn't captured him because he was a threat to them physically. They were afraid of what he might become. Zorak looked at him with something close to fear. This power. It's in you, Alex. They weren't just holding you. They were containing you. Alex swallowed hard. He wanted to deny it, to believe he'd escaped through sheer will and determination, but the truth was staring him in the face. The ship's systems, the prison's reactions, it wasn't him. Not the person he thought he was, anyway. His mind raced back to the night of his abduction. The flashes of light, the strange sensations in his body, the fragments of memories he couldn't quite piece together. Had they done something to him? Changed him? Or had they discovered something that had been lying dormant all along? He wasn't sure what was worse, the idea that the Darians had created this power within him, or that it had always been there, waiting for the right trigger. Alex's breath caught as the weight of the revelation pressed down on him. Had he ever really been in control? Every victory in the prison, every step of his escape, had it all been guided by this hidden force within him? He thought he was outsmarting his captors, that his ingenuity had kept him alive, but now it felt like something else had been pulling the strings, manipulating him. His hands tightened on the controls, the starship responding with a fluid grace that felt almost natural. He wasn't sure what frightened him more, what the Darians had planned, or the fact that deep down, part of him had known something was different all along. The thought of the power sitting dormant inside him twisted in his gut. What could it do? What had it done already? The transmission's warning echoed in his head. If he unlocked the full potential, they were all doomed. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had just piloted this ship to freedom, hands that had felt like an extension of the starship itself. He had never asked for this, never wanted to be part of whatever nightmare he was now entangled in. The rage he'd carried in the prison, the burning need for revenge against the Darians, flared up inside him again. They'd taken him, locked him away, treated him like an animal. The anger boiled over, and for a brief moment, he thought about turning the ship around. Going back. Using whatever this power was to destroy them, to make them pay for what they'd done to him. He could feel it rising inside him, a force he didn't fully understand but knew was there, just beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. But then the fear set in. The realization that he didn't know where that power might lead. If he let it out, if he used it to destroy the Darians, what would be left of him? Would he even be Alex anymore? Or would he become something else entirely, consumed by the very force that had given him this strange ability? The conflict twisted inside him, pulling him in two directions. His desire for vengeance was strong, but there was something more powerful rising in its place, an understanding that the consequences of his actions could be far greater than he'd imagined. This wasn't just about him anymore. The Darians were scared of him, of what he could do. If he unleashed whatever was inside him, it might not just be the Darians who suffered. It might be everyone. Zorak's voice broke through his thoughts. You can't let them control you, Alex. But you also can't let that power control you either. Alex stared at the alien, seeing in his eyes a strange mix of fear and hope. Zorak didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew enough to know that Alex was at a crossroads. Alex gripped the controls tighter. He had a choice to make. He could turn back, let the power consume him in his rage, or he could control it, master it before it mastered him. His hands shook, but not from fear this time. From resolve. He wasn't going to let the Darians win, but he also wasn't going to become the weapon they feared. It was a decision that hit him hard, but he knew it was the right one. He wouldn't destroy the Darians. Not like this. He would find another way to deal with them, on his terms. The power within him would not define him. He would define it. For the first time in what felt like forever, Alex felt a calm settle over him. Alex hovered in the silence of space, staring out at the alien world shrinking beneath him. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on him. He could still feel the pulse of the power inside him, that strange, uncontrollable force that had awakened during his escape. It was there, like a living thing, waiting for him to use it. He could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface, the urge to turn the ship around, to unleash everything he had on the Darians. They had tortured him, held him captive, and treated him like nothing. A part of him wanted to make them pay, to rain destruction down on their civilization until there was nothing left. But that part of him wasn't in control anymore. He had made his decision. Instead of destruction, Alex steered the ship away, pushing further and further from their reach. He wasn't their weapon. He wasn't going to let them, or this power, define him. The path to vengeance was tempting, but it would come at a cost he wasn't willing to pay. If he gave in now, he'd lose himself. And in the end, what would be left of him if all he became was a tool of rage and destruction? He thought of the other prisoners, those who had been broken by their time in the prison. He could see now that escaping wasn't just about getting free physically. It was about freeing himself from the burden of revenge that had consumed him. As the stars stretched out before him, Alex felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He was in control. The ship moved with his thoughts, as if they were one and the same, but now he directed it with purpose. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but it was away from the war, away from the madness of the alien territory that had tried to cage him. There was more to this universe than just destruction, more than just getting even. He wasn't running from the Darians. He was choosing a new path, one they couldn't control. The power still thrummed beneath his skin, but it no longer felt like a threat. He was learning to live with it, to understand it, not let it overwhelm him. Whatever they had feared in him, whatever potential they believed he had, he would decide how to use it. Not for destruction, but for something greater. The journey from prisoner to pilot had changed him in ways he hadn't expected. At the start, he'd been filled with anger, focused solely on revenge, willing to do anything to escape the pain. But now, as he looked back, he realized that the true battle hadn't been against the aliens, it had been within himself. The Alex who had been thrown into that prison would have burned the Darians' world to the ground without hesitation. The Alex who now sat in the cockpit, steering the ship toward an unknown future, was something else entirely. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. The power inside him was no longer a burden or a curse. It was a part of him, but one that he could now control. He had become more than just a victim of circumstance. He had taken control of his destiny, shaping it into something more meaningful than revenge. As he reflected on his journey, Alex knew he had grown into someone stronger than he ever imagined. He wasn't the scared, confused human who had been dragged into the prison, desperate for an escape at any cost. He had become a man who could face the uncertainty of the universe without fear. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would meet them head-on, not as a victim, but as someone who had learned the true meaning of power, control. The ship's navigation systems beeped softly, alerting him to new paths opening up ahead. The vast expanse of space stretched out before him, endless and full of possibilities. Alex smiled faintly, knowing that his journey was just beginning. The galaxy was far more expansive than he had ever imagined, and somewhere out there, answers awaited him. He didn't know what his next steps would be, but for the first time in a long while, that didn't scare him. His path was his own now, and the world beyond the stars beckoned with new challenges, new mysteries, and new adventures. Whatever this power inside him was, however it had come to be, it was his to wield. And he would use it to carve out his own place in this universe, on his own terms. As the ship accelerated into the unknown, leaving the alien territory far behind, Alex felt a sense of closure wash over him. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far greater, something he was now ready to face. The galaxy was vast, and the future stretched out before him. And for the first time in a long time, Alex was at peace with where it might lead.